SCP-682 Child Termination Test. The child termination test for SCP-682 is when the SCP Foundation tried to kill SCP-682 by putting two children in the room with it to see what happens. Yep, that's the plan. If you just made the same face I did, you're normal. SCP-682 is a big, hateful creature that almost never dies, no matter what the Foundation does to it. They've tried all kinds of dangerous stuff and it keeps surviving. So one researcher thought, maybe kids will make it react differently, like the monster will suddenly unlock a be nice setting. And it goes bad instantly. The kids walk in, SCP-682 attacks like a switch got flipped, alarms start, people are yelling to shut it down, and within moments the kids are dead. Just a brutal mess and a report that basically says, we got nothing except blood on our hands. Even with SCP Foundation, this test is remembered as a hard line that never should have been crossed. The researcher who did it wasn't praised, they were punished, and others say they were thrown into SCP-682's chamber themselves. So the punchline is dark but simple. SCP-682 stayed alive, and the Foundation proved something way scarier than the monster: how far people will go when they're desperate. SCP-1123 Forced Touch Test. The Forced Touch Test for SCP-1123 is when the SCP Foundation made people touch a human skull on purpose to see how badly it would mess them up. Yep, that's the plan. If your eyebrow just tried to leave your face, you're normal. SCP-1123 is a skull that doesn't bite you or stab you or do anything flashy. It just overtakes your brain the moment you touch it. The Foundation already knew it could drop someone into a fugue state, basically a walking staring body while the mind is somewhere else. So naturally, they kept running tests anyway because the clipboard demands sacrifice. Bro. Here's what happens when contact happens. The subject touches the skull, goes blank immediately, and their mind gets slammed into first-person memories of torture and executions tied to real historical genocides, full emotional damage. It's like your brain gets forced into the worst possible cutscene and the skip button is gone. They come back with the memories permanently stuck in their head like a cursed autoplay feed, and the Foundation keeps running it on new people for data, which is basically just counting how many minds they can wreck. Even by SCP Foundation standards, this one is remembered as cooked because it's not the skull that's the menace, it's the decision to keep pressing the button. So the punchline is dark but simple. SCP-1123 never has to escape containment because the experiment itself turns a touch into a lifetime of damage, and the Foundation acts surprised when everyone calls that monstrous. SCP-2128 Cradle of the Liar. Experiment. The SCP-2128 experiment is the Foundation using a stone cradle to force people to tell the absolute truth or get burned alive. That's not metaphorical. SCP-2128 is a giant stone cradle shaped like an ancient idol, and once someone is placed inside it, lying is basically a death wish. The moment a lie leaves their mouth, the thing heats up and starts cooking them. And when I say cooking, I mean full boss fight lava damage, not a warning tap. This is the kind of setup that feels like a JRPG trial room where the NPC says, "Be honest," and you already know this guy is cooked. The Foundation figured this out pretty fast, and instead of backing away slowly, they leaned in. They started using SCP-2128 to interrogate Class D personnel, asking questions and watching to see how fast the cradle reacts. If someone tried to dodge, twist, or half-lie, the cradle responded instantly. Truth or burn. Watching these tests is like watching a streamer try to lie to an NPC with a built-in lie detector that shoots fire. Everyone knows how it ends. The subject panics, the heat spikes, and the Foundation calmly writes down how precise the response was. Absolute menace behavior, man. So the takeaway is simple. SCP-2128 doesn't care about justice or morality. It just enforces truth with violence. And the Foundation looked at that and said, yeah, let's use it as a tool, which somehow makes the experiment scarier than the object itself. SCP-3794 Salsa Hammer Experiment. The SCP-3794 experiment is the Foundation testing a hammer that turns whatever it hits into salsa, and yes, that includes people. At first glance, it looks like a goofy prop from a cursed reel prank, the kind where the creator posts an apology video later, except this one sits on a lab table while researchers nod seriously and pretend nothing about this setup is completely unhinged. The moment the hammer hits something solid, the impact converts that material into actual edible salsa. Somehow the Foundation treats this like a routine test. One hit to the head does not kill the subject outright, and that detail alone makes everyone watching mentally rewind for a second. Part of the skull and brain turns into salsa while the rest of the person stays alive. And then the situation escalated in the worst possible way. The Foundation used this hammer to bludgeon a Class D personnel to death, turning a portion of his brain and skull into salsa. Instead of immediately freeing the victim, they let him convulse and used the salsa-turned brain to write "help" on the ground before finishing him off. What really locks this in as peak SCP behavior is that the Foundation does not stop immediately. They observe, take notes, confirm the effect, and only then shut it down, treating human suffering like a checkbox. So SCP-3794 is terrifying not just because it's violent, but because the Foundation saw a salsa hammer, swung it anyway, and called the results data. Absolute menace behavior, man. Femur Breaker, SCP-106 Containment Bait. The femur breaker is the Foundation's cruel little procedure for luring SCP-106 back into its cell by using a human scream as bait. Here's how the experiment works in practice. They strap a Class D subject into a purpose-built device, and the whole setup is wired like a trap in a horror game where the monster only shows up after the objective gets completed. Then the machine breaks the person's thigh bone, and the facility pipes the screaming through speakers, because apparently subtlety is not on the menu. And yes, it's as awful as it sounds, which is why this thing became SCP fandom folklore. It's basically a real-life aggro pull, like when you poke a raid boss in an MMO and everyone immediately regrets it, except the raid boss is an ancient rotting kidnapper who can phase through walls. Absolute menace. The wild part is the Foundation treats this like a repeatable method, not a one-time emergency. The whole goal is simple. SCP-106 hears the suffering, shows up to grab the victim, and that gives the team a narrow window to slam containment shut. If you're thinking, man, this is evil but also weirdly efficient, congrats, you just understood the SCP vibe. So the punchline is dark, the monster gets baited by pain, and the people running the test look at that and go, cool, run it again, log the timing, and pretend the paperwork makes it less cursed. Project Ichabod, Type Green. Project Ichabod is the SCP Foundation's plan to wipe out most reality benders on Earth before they can break reality itself. Yeah, that sentence already sounds like a villain arc. Reality benders, also called type greens, are people who can literally rewrite how the world works, like living cheat codes. In the 1980s, the Foundation looked at the growing number of them and decided this was turning into an endgame boss rush, so they teamed up with the Global Occult Coalition and went full scorched earth mode. The operation targeted type greens worldwide, hunting them down and eliminating them in bulk. Just coordinated strikes, lists, and cleanup teams, like a speedrun where the objective is delete the modded players before the server crashes, and by the end, around 3/4 of known reality benders were gone. Bro, here's the extra curse part. The Foundation didn't just do this to feel safer. They collected the bones of the dead type greens and used them to build Scranton reality anchors, machines that stabilize reality. So the same people who could bend reality became the raw materials used to lock it back into place. If that doesn't sound like an anime villain justification speech, nothing does. So Project Ichabod isn't scary because it failed, it's scary because it worked. Reality got safer, the numbers went down, and the Foundation proved it will absolutely choose genocide if the spreadsheet says it's the optimal solution. Cameron the Crusader Conditioning Test. The SCP-2241 experiment is the Foundation psychologically manipulating a 7-year-old reality bender to turn him into a weapon. Cameron, nicknamed the Crusader, is a kid with powers strong enough to bend reality, and instead of treating this like a child welfare emergency, the Foundation treats it like a live service game. They isolate him, control every interaction, and drip-feed information so he believes the world constantly needs him to step in. It's basically emotional DLC with trauma baked in. The Foundation stages fake crises to push Cameron into using his abilities, the same way a game keeps spawning enemies to stop you from logging off. Every time he saves the day, they reinforce the idea that his worth equals his usefulness. Buddy, that's villain origin story speedrun behavior. What makes this extra uncomfortable is how clean it looks on paper. No chains or torture room, they use psychologists, scripts, and carefully curated lies. Like an anime training arc that never ends and never tells the hero he's being used. Absolute menace, man. By the time Cameron starts showing stress, confusion, and emotional breakdowns, the Foundation calls it progress. From their perspective, he's becoming more controllable, more focused, more effective. From everyone else's perspective, a kid is being gaslit into burning himself out for containment metrics. So the ending lands hard. Cameron doesn't become a threat on his own. The real horror is watching adults with clipboards slowly turn a kid's childhood into a training program and calling it success. SCP-24119, Amnestic Drug Creation Experiment. The SCP-24119 experiment is the Foundation using a weird process to make stronger amnestics, which are their memory wipe drugs for keeping the public from remembering SCP stuff. Here's the simple link. The Foundation deals with monsters, anomalies, and disasters, and the fastest way to stop the internet from exploding is making witnesses forget. That's what amnestics do. SCP-2419 is one of the creepiest ways they produce them, because it treats a human brain like a storage drive full of moments you can extract and bottle. When a Class D dies, the lab moves the body in and targets the happiest memories in the brain, the warm, comforting ones like family moments and little wins. They process those good memory signals into a stronger forget pill, the same way a game turns rare loot into a powerful upgrade, and the Foundation is absolutely min-maxing secrecy like it's a battle pass. Then SCP-2419 hits you with the cursed side effect. Sometimes the body doesn't stay quiet afterward. The remains start laughing on repeat like a broken NPC voice line, even while they're being disposed of, and everyone in the room has that moment of, man, this job is not normal. So SCP-2419 matters because it makes the Foundation's cover-ups way more effective, and it does it by turning human happiness into a lab ingredient, which is funny in a dark way until you remember they keep running it anyway. SCP-596 Cursed Rebirth Snake Experiment. The SCP-596 experiment is the Foundation trapping a human in an immortal loop so they can harvest his organs over and over. Here's the setup, and yeah, it's already wild. A test subject is bound to an anomalous statue tied to SCP-596, which grants regeneration so strong that nothing they do actually kills him. Organs grow back, wounds close, the subject stays alive no matter what, like a video game character stuck in God mode with the worst possible objectives. The Foundation looks at this and thinks, logistics. They repeatedly remove organs for medical use, knowing everything will regenerate. It turns the subject into a walking supply crate, and if that doesn't sound like a dark RPG mechanic, you haven't played enough games. Buddy is basically a loot farm that screams. To make sure the subject doesn't resist or break mentally, the Foundation installs a device that constantly disrupts his brain activity, keeping him docile and compliant. It's like turning the difficulty slider down by scrambling the player's controls, except the player is a real person. This goes on continuously. No end condition, no release, just infinite regeneration and infinite extraction logged neatly in reports. Absolute menace behavior, man. In the end, it feels less like horror and more like a routine job that should not exist, where the worst thing is how normal everyone acts. SCP-231 Procedure 110 Montauk Procedure. 110 Montauk is the SCP Foundation's containment ritual used to prevent a world-ending entity from being born. That already sounds intense, but here's the weird part. Almost everything about this procedure is locked behind redactions, which means most staff don't even know what they're actually doing, just that it has to happen on schedule. The setup feels like a cursed maintenance routine, where skipping one step might brick reality itself. Think of it like a live service game event that absolutely cannot fail, except the stakes are existence. The procedure is carried out on SCP-231, a young woman believed to be capable of giving birth to something catastrophic. Staff assigned to Montauk are told it involves actions so disturbing that participants are often given amnestics afterward because no one wants those memories sticking around. And the Foundation treats this like a job rotation, which somehow makes it worse. What really messes with people is the possibility that the horror is partially performative. There are hints that the procedure might rely on belief and fear more than actual physical actions, meaning the ritual works because everyone involved thinks it does. That's like a placebo effect, but for stopping the apocalypse, buddy. It keeps the world safe, sure, but it also turns grown adults into people who follow instructions like NPCs because the alternative is maybe apocalypse.